Let's start off at number 10 now with the dodo. The dodo is one of the most famous extinct animals of all time, responsible for coining the phrase "as dead as a dodo." The last of these birds was thought to have died out in 1662. They were only found on the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. They lived in harmony with the ecosystem there and had no natural predators until humans arrived and killed them off for food. Scientists discussed the possibility of bringing back the dodo from extinction during a TEDx discussion in Washington DC in 2013. The dodo's closest living relative is the Nicobar pigeon, and some say that one of its eggs could be fused with the cell of a dodo to create a living dodo. Imagine if that happened. It would ruin that phrase.
Number 9. The woolly rhinoceros. Yeah, since we're on the woolly train, what better time to mention this hairy beast? The woolly rhino. I oddly want to pet him. Just one brush. Once upon a time, these rhinos were common throughout Europe and Asia. They were well prepared for the cold tundra. They had a thick blanket of fur, just like the old woolly mammoth. So no ice age will stop this rhino. I mean, it didn't help them out, but it was mostly humans needing food and warmth that led to their extinction. But cut to 14,000 years later, we're trying to apologize. We're trying to make it up to them by bringing them back to life. Hi, you exist now. Isn't that great? To a world that's even more harsh. Yeah, remember when it was cold? Well, now it's really warm. Good game, rhinos. Might want to go get a haircut. The same company responsible for the Mammoth Project is also trying to bring back this hairy boy. I mean, I'm all for science, don't get me wrong, but if these species died off that long ago, will highways help? Probably not.
Number 8, the heath hen. That's interesting, I don't know anything about that. Here we go. Finally something that isn't the size of a minivan. I'm already excited. The heath van we lost quite recently actually, which of course is sad. We're losing birds rapidly, especially in North America. Our prairies are shrinking and they're being converted to agriculture. By 1870, the only remaining heath hens were protected in a vineyard, or a vineyard. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. But sadly, when 1932 rolled around, those fluffy dudes were no more. Also, Thanksgiving dinners didn't help. I get hungry sometimes. Yeah, we ate another animal to extinction. I'm seeing a pattern here. However, all hope is not lost for the heath hens, hence the title of this list. A company called Revive and Restore, good name, they're trying to get these hens back to the sky rather than back on our plates. They've been working with the community since 2014 with some scientific help from the prairie chicken. Before we continue, if you haven't done so already, go check out our sister page Bumblebee. Taylor and I break down top 10 lists, but it's all ancient history, medieval stuff, lots of knights. Lots of knights. We love knights here, and castles. So make sure to check out our Bumblebee Facebook page for more, and maybe some behind the scenes content. I'll see you there. I'll see you there. Maybe some Wild West stuff too, you don't know.
Maybe some yees or haws. I don't know. We may have done some yees haws.
Yo.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you a lot. Number 7. Great auk. Once thriving in colonies off North Atlantic coasts, the great auk would grow up to 30 inches long, and its tiny little wings would only be used to swim, so don't get too excited. These little balls of fluff did not fly in the skies. Their wings were really tiny. They were like 13 centimeters long. Just little... They were cute, but quite defenseless. I don't know if you could have picked up on that. You know, very cute, very defenseless, obviously. Fluffy dudes. Around the 1500s, European fishermen discovered this perfect area for hunting, and it just happened to be where most, if not all, these great auks were thriving. Newfoundland, yeah, it looked like the iceberg in Club Penguin at this point. It was packed. It was a good time if you weren't a great auk. You were eating good if you were a fisherman, so their number rapidly declined. By 1950, the last 2 known specimens were hunted by one single fisherman on Eldey Island, just off the coast of Iceland. One dude just Thanos'd an entire bird species. What a monster. Scientists plan on using genetic information extracted from their fossils or preserved organs. You know, we love organs in jars. So they plan on editing their DNA with the closest living species, which is now the razor-billed auk. The organization Revive and Restore is behind the wheel on this one again. You'll see these names come up a few times over and over on this list because, yeah, not too many companies are trying to revive dead animals. What do you know?
Number 6. The Steller sea cow. Named after George Wilhelm Steller, who discovered this ball of blubber back in 1741. The Steller sea cow was first discovered during the Vitus Bering's Great Northern Expedition. They found her right after the crew became shipwrecked. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, here's a surprise sea cow to confuse you. Good luck! They were quite common millions of years ago, but sadly, and unsurprisingly, they were no match for humans. They only swam about a meter deep, so they were quite easy to hunt. George Steller assures that these creatures were made of pure love. They had strong bond with their families, which made it even easier to hunt. That's sick. Taylor. That's Taylor. Wow, that's really sad. What's also sad is my pronunciation of gestation, considering they had a 1-year gestation period. The species just couldn't reproduce fast enough to keep up with the hunting. But scientists were able to sequence their genome, which means we could see these creatures again one day. The answer may lie in the DNA of a dugong. Is that a Pokemon? That's a Pokemon, isn't it? That's a Pokemon.
Moving on to number 5 now, we have Gigantopithecus. In many ways, this creature is what we'd call Bigfoot. It lived between 9 million to 100,000 years ago in Asia and was the largest ape on Earth. They stood about 10 feet tall and their diets were mostly vegetarian. When I say stand, I mean stand in the way gorillas and chimpanzees do. It's thought they walked on all fours. However, a small number of scientists do think they walked on 2 legs like humans. Either way, with a 12-foot arm span, you'd be best to stay clear of this giant and unpredictable ape.
Number 4, Pyrenean ibex. I'm just as confused as you guys are. That Pyrenean ibex went extinct 22 years ago. Last one was seen in 2000, my friends. The last one was a female named Celia. That's so nice. A falling tree sadly killed her. Oh my god. That's horrible. A subspecies of the Spanish ibex were once native to the Pyrenees Mountains on the border of Spain and France. Back in the Dark Ages, medieval times, their population was reduced drastically to an endangered level. They would roam the land, but knights with swords and bows and armies to feed, you can kind of guess what happened there. Disease being spread by humans at this point also played an important role in their demise. Humans could barely keep up, let alone animals. The Pyrenean ibex was successfully cloned and brought back from extinction for a whopping 7 minutes. DNA from the last living lady was implanted into the womb of a domestic goat. Science is wild, dude. That's so crazy. Lung complications are why the clone didn't last longer than 7 minutes, but listen to what I just said. They made a clone for 7 minutes. It's a start.
Number 3, the Tasmanian tiger. Once native to Australia, classic, the Tasmanian tiger, also known as the thylacine, you have to say that in Australian accent, the thylacine. It was a massive thylacine. I'm gonna say that all day now. It was a massive carnivorous marsupial that went extinct around the 1930s. So major factors here, as you probably have guessed, climate change, hunting, and its genetic diversity wasn't all too great. It's sad on one hand because these beautiful creatures disappeared so recently, but it's recent enough that we have a shot at bringing them back. Yeah, just back to life. Hi, that was a close one. Go hunt. Yeah, imagine looking outside and seeing this thing on your front yard. Are we ready for this? I can barely handle like deer in Canada. I don't know. Squirrels, black squirrels, they're scary up in Canada. I don't know. Thank God for those jars though. About time we open those up. Some jars of organs, classic. Already we have some of the Tasmanian tiger genes present after scientists, inserted them into a mouse fetus and they're just waiting to see what happens. The Australian Museum has been working hard to bring this beast back to life and they're close. They're only still lacking the DNA fully to recreate it. So if you have any jars of Tasmanian tiger parts, comment down below, hit that thumbs up, let us know. We'll bring them back.
Number 2, the gastric brooding frog. That just sounds like it needs to be shot. I'm a big fan of frogs. I mean, I don't mind them, they're green and stuff and they're slimy, I guess. They're pretty cool. Except for when they hatch babies out of their backs. Taylor showed me a video of that earlier and I almost threw up. There's a joke there somewhere, but I don't know, that's just gross, dude. Why would you show me that, Taylor? Frogs are wild, but back in the day they were quite dangerous to be around. The gastric brooding frogs, for one, are so alien. These frogs would swallow its egg and hatch them from their mouth. No. So if you saw this in the wild, you would know. You might just see one soon. Maybe your kids will see one in the wild. Now they went extinct back in 1983, but scientists have figured out a way to implant dead cells into a fresh egg from an entirely different frog species. Let's just hope these new ones aren't born out of their back and we're golden. I don't have to think about that. Oh god. Oh.
And finally, number 1, the Megatherium. Mega. Big last, number 1, mega number 1. That's actually not that big. We talked about bringing back the woolly mammoth, so what other Ice Age cast member can we see in live action in the future? Let's see. Perhaps the Megatherium, aka the giant ground sloth. Yeah, they're kind of cute. They're scary, but they're pretty cute. They're slow and cute. Sloths used to be a lot bigger than we think. We often laugh at them for being so slow. The movie Ice Age sure didn't help their case as the dodo birds. Of course, the giant ground sloth is closely related to our modern three-toed sloth, but luckily for us, today's sloths aren't the same size as an elephant. Yeah, because that would be a horror film, wouldn't it? If a giant elephant-sized sloth started to slowly climb a tree outside of my house, I'd be sick. I wouldn't wake up. I'd be like, that's it. I had a heart attack. That's the scariest thing I've ever seen. We may be able to bring this one back, although they died off 8,000 years ago. It's still possible. Anything is possible with science and a little hope and fear. DNA samples were extracted from their hair remains, so the next step is to develop a fetus in an artificial womb. That's the hard part, so keep in tune for that. Keep in tune for that. That's the thing we like to say here. Keep in tune, guys. Keep in tune for part 2.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Megalodon. Megalodon was the biggest shark that ever lived. They went extinct about 2.6 million years ago. Scientists think they could have grown to an insane 60 feet in length. That's about 3 times as long as the largest great white shark ever found. Here's how big they are. Before modern science identified them as a prehistoric species of shark, people used to think the Megalodon teeth they'd found were actually dragon tongues. Others said they belonged to giant serpents, or even that they were rocks that had fallen from the moon. Just think how big and scary you'd have to be for people to think that your teeth belonged to dragons or outer space. It used to feed on prehistoric whales, and unlike modern sharks, which go for the soft underbelly of their prey, Megalodon just went for the whole thing. They would bite down on the whale's chest with some 41,000 pounds of force, the strongest ever recorded, and simply crushed the whale's chest cavity and organs. They didn't stand a chance, and unless you're an even bigger whale watching this video, you probably wouldn't either. Next up at number 9 now, we have the mammoth. Now this is perhaps the most famous extinct animal of all time. Society has been obsessed with these woolly elephant cousins for decades. Interesting fact for you guys, although most of them did die out about 10,000 years ago, a small population of mammoths survived on Wrangel Island off the coast of Russia until just 3,600 years ago. That's nothing if you think about it. Humans were running around at the end of the Bronze Age during then. Anyway, because of how recently they died out and how many of their bodies became frozen in the permafrost, scientists have actually been able to extract cells from mammoth remains. The plan is then to splice specific mammoth genes into the genome of an elephant embryo to create a sort of mammoth-elephant hybrid with all the mammoth traits we recognize. Now this isn't just for no reason either. Some scientists say that these new mammoths could help prevent tundra permafrost from melting and releasing huge amounts of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the thylacine. This species died out in the 1930s after being hunted to extinction in its native Australia. It may look like a dog, but the thylacine actually belonged to the marsupial family and was a relative of kangaroos and koalas. A group of Australian scientists led by Michael Archer have previously worked on bringing back the thylacine from extinction. They called themselves the Lazarus Project. Their efforts only managed to capture some of the fragments of the thylacine DNA though, and not enough for a true clone. Still, even this was enough for people to see the thylacine as a strong candidate for eventual de-extinction. Next up at number 7 now, we have the gastric brooding frog. This little frog was native to the eastern coast of Australia and went extinct less than 100 years ago. It got its name from its interesting method of reproduction. The females would swallow their fertilized eggs, which would then hatch into tadpoles in the frog's stomach before being vomited out into the water. It sounds gross, but it definitely worked. Because of how recently they went extinct, scientists recovered enough genetic material to create living embryos. They haven't been used to create an actual gastric brooding frog yet, but some argue that even this means they are already back from extinction. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the bucado. The bucado was a wild goat native to the Pyrenees. The last one, a female named Celia, died in January 2000. Scientists preserved her cells and attempted to bring the species back from the dead. They injected the nuclei from Celia's cells into goat eggs that had been emptied of their DNA. They then implanted 57 of them into different goat surrogate mothers of closely related species. Only 7 of them became pregnant and 6 of those had miscarriages. One of the goats successfully gave birth to a clone though. Fernandez Arias held the newborn calf in his arms. He said it was struggling to breathe and all of their attempts to help failed. The calf died just 10 minutes later. It was found to have a faulty lung caused by a genetic defect. At the time, it was the closest the world has ever come to de-extinction and still remains a possible candidate.
Number 5, the dodo bird. So dodo birds were once big and beautiful. These flightless ground nesting birds once filled the islands of the Indian Ocean. They had massive talons. They were pretty scary. They were gray and blue, so they were beautiful. They didn't have any natural predator, right? This sounds great. No natural predator until we came along, of course. Around 1507, the island was discovered by Portuguese sailors, and the rest, yeah, you can guess, the rest is history. They were the easiest bird to hunt. Had the phrase dead as a dodo, right? They were easy to take out. They weren't just loved by sailors either. They were not 100% to blame here, okay? Monkeys, rats, pigs, any animal that made its way to the island just had their eggs for lunch. It was so easy. So it didn't take a long time for the dodo population to completely be gone. The last dodo was hunted in 1681, but could it be on this list? Could we bring back the dodo bird today? Hopefully, I mean maybe, I don't know. Scientists found an extremely well-preserved dodo skeleton back in 2007, so we may have a chance at picking apart some DNA. A research facility near Melbourne, Australia is currently trying to use pigeon genes to bring this bird back. Again, I'm all for science, I'm all for bringing animals back to life. You know, scientifically, that's a feat in itself, great work. work, we love it. But do we really think no one's gonna make dodo bird chicken wings? That's a problem waiting to happen. As soon as I said it, you were like, oh, that would be pretty good.
Alright, moving on to number 4 now, we have Steller's sea cow. This sea mammal was discovered by Europeans in 1741 on Bering Island in the northern Pacific Ocean. It went extinct just 27 years later after being hunted for its meat, fat and hide. It belonged to a group of species known as Dugongidae. The only surviving species of that group is now the dugong. Some scientists hope that if enough sea cow DNA can be recovered, they can fuse it with the egg of a dugong and bring back the sea cow from extinction. One major problem though is size. Modern dugongs are just a fraction of the size of the extinct sea cow, so the pregnancy would be extremely difficult. Let's just say that. It's a problem that's still being worked on though. Next up at number 3 now, we have the passenger pigeon. Okay, this one might not be as cool as some of the other animals on our list, but give it a chance. In the 1860s, there were billions of these pigeons across North America. One account said that a flock once passed over southern Ontario that was a mile wide, 300 miles long, and took 14 hours to pass overhead. Less than 50 years later, they were extinct, mainly due to mass hunting. Enough specimens have been preserved so that scientists could reconstruct the bird's entire genome. The plan would then be to fuse this with the egg of the passenger pigeon's closest living relative, the band-tailed pigeon. However, there is no guarantee that the band-tailed pigeon will then tend to the egg or even look after any successful hatchlings. Next up at number 2 now, we have the auroch. About 10,000 years ago, the prehistoric settlers of India and Eurasia domesticated the auroch, an animal that looks a lot like a cow. That's because all modern day cattle are the descendants of the auroch. The auroch itself went extinct in the wild, but scientists are hoping to bring it back through back-breeding cattle. This is where they breed cattle together that resemble the auroch. They then take the calves that most resemble the auroch and breed them, etc., until eventually you get something that looks a lot like an auroch. One example of this that's already happened is heck cattle. Here's some pictures of them now. However, some people have debated whether these even really look like auroch. They're also a lot smaller too. Maybe they will get there one day though. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Carolina parakeet. This bird was hunted to extinction 100 years ago. It was native to the eastern US, which surprised me because its plumage would suggest it was much more tropical. Its feathers were also the reason it went extinct. Many of them were hunted so that the feathers could be used in women's hats, which were fashionable at the time. Some remained as pets or in captivity, but eventually they all died out. Now, as with many others on our list, their extinction being quite recent is a reason why they could make a good candidate for de-extinction. Some people worry though that if it was brought back, history would just repeat itself all over again as their feathers would instantly become valuable.
Number 10, the woolly mammoth. It was announced that not long ago that a team of scientists and entrepreneurs announced they were trying to bring back the woolly mammoth back to life. No zoo will ever be the same again, or smell the same for that matter. A company called Colossal is responsible for this colossal project. The brilliant team of scientists are planning to bring the woolly mammoth back to life by creating an elephant embryo made of mammoth genomes. Pretty cool. Have you ever seen Jurassic Park? I feel like they haven't seen Jurassic Park. It's kind of a bad idea. The last mammoth to ever live was 7,500 years ago, but what if we had these hairy Goliaths back again today? The Siberian tundra thousands of years ago was once full of woolly mammoths, but climate change began to slow them down. It also didn't help that humans needed food. And these guys could surely feed a family of 4. Mammoths also provided warmth, which was perfect for early humans. It's pretty cold out there. Genetics company Colossal raised over $15 million to try and bring this animal back to life. But should they?
Next up at number 9 now, we have Phobiromis pattersoni. This was a huge rat. Some scientists have even called it Ratzilla. Technically, it wasn't a rat, but if you're scared of them, I bet you'd be scared of this. They reached a whopping 9.8 feet long. Their tails alone could reach 4.9 feet. They had the weight to go with it too, often reaching over 1,500 pounds. Like most rodents, they had big incisor teeth. In the case of Ratzilla though, their incisor teeth were about a foot long. It's a good job they were herbivores and used those teeth for plant life. However, I don't think that knowledge would do much to calm people if they were suddenly seen running around the streets at night. Coming at number 8 now, we have the Titanoboa. Everyone with a phobia of snakes, please look away now. This was a massive snake, thought to actually be the largest that's ever lived. Its name literally means Titanic boa. It lived around 60 million years ago. The largest individuals reached up to 42 feet in length and weighed over 2,500 pounds. That's well over a ton for a snake. It could grow this big because the Earth's climate was a lot warmer back then. As the climate began to cool over the next few million years, only smaller snakes could survive, and snakes like the Titan boa began to disappear. Probably a good thing for us humans, because we would not want to be running around worrying about snakes that weigh as much as your average rhino. No thanks. Next up at number 7 now, we have Dunkleosteus. This is a fish that lived about 370 million years ago during the late Devonian period. These things were big, growing up to 30 feet in length and weighing over a ton. What's most scary about them is their bite. This fish could bite down on its prey with a force of some 6,000 newtons. That might not mean anything to you until I say that's almost about 4 times the bite strength of a polar bear. This fish could bite your arm clean off you, including the bone. Its jaws were so efficient they could hinge them open and snap them shut in a matter of milliseconds. If we were to bring this species back to life, people might worry about them more than sharks. At number 6 now, we have the megapiranha. Unlike a lot of scientific names on this list, the megapiranha has a kind of obvious one. It was a giant piranha fish that lived about 10 million years ago. They grew to around 3 feet long, and unlike modern piranhas, they had not one but 2 separate rows of teeth. Scientists aren't even sure how hard they could bite, but some estimates go as high as 4,749 newtons. If that's the case, they would bite more than twice as hard as a hippo. Neither of those sounds fun, but one definitely sounds worse. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the quagga. The quagga is an extinct subspecies of the plain zebra and lived in South Africa. The last wild quagga was hunted to extinction in 1878. The last captive one died in Amsterdam 5 years later. And because of their close relationship to the plain zebra, some scientists have created the Quagga Project, which is attempting to use selective breeding to create a new subspecies that strongly resembles the quagga. In 2016, the project announced they had 6 individuals showing the preferred pattern. The goal is to have 50 of them and then move them to a protected area for continued breeding. Will this count as the quagga being brought back from extinction? Let me know what you think. Next up at number 4 now, we have Helicoprion. This was a shark-like creature that lived some 290 million years ago during the early Permian era. We've seen some very weird creatures on the list so far, but this might just beat them all. The Helicoprion is famous for his spirally arranged clusters of teeth known as tooth walls. This bizarre set of teeth would have reached about 24 inches in length. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the short-faced bear. The scientific name for these is the Arctodus. They first appeared in the fossil records 1.8 million years ago and seem to survive all the way up until just 11,000 years ago. So a pretty close call for us modern humans. One specimen found weighed 2,110 pounds. They stood up to 12 feet tall on their hind legs, about twice the height of the average human male. Their vertical arm reach extended up to a further 14 feet. I could keep giving you guys stats on just how monstrous these bears were. Between those ones and the pictures you're seeing now, I think you get the idea. They were 50% larger than the biggest polar bears in recorded history. Scientists estimate they needed a whopping 35 pounds of meat a day just to survive. If we brought them back from extinction, I'm sure they wouldn't mind human meat being a part of that. Next up at number 2 now, we have the Meganeura. Dragonflies are nice, right? They're pretty cool looking creatures you find fluttering around ponds and rivers. They're a little bit freaky if they land on you, but you know, hey, at least they're small. Not Meganeura though. This massive dragonfly-like creature lived about 300 million years ago during a Carboniferous period. Its wingspan could reach up to 30 inches, making this thing about the size of a 6-month-old baby. Don't ask me why I'm using a baby as a reference, it's just the best comparison I could find. They reach this size because insects need more oxygen the bigger they are. Back then, the oxygen levels in the atmosphere were higher than the current 20% we have today. This allowed insects, including Meganeura, to grow insanely big. You wouldn't need your hand to bat this thing away, more like a baseball bat. And finally at number 1 now, we have Deinosuchus. This is an extinct relation of the modern alligator that lived some 80 to 73 million years ago. That means it was alive at the same time as T-Rex. In fact, it's thought these two actually fought it out back then. They are thought to have been up to 33 feet in length and have weighed as much as 5 tons. It looks like the T-Rex might not have been much of a match for this oversized alligator. There have actually been T-Rex fossils found with massive Deinosuchus bites found in them. Perhaps they were just defending their territories from T-Rexes, or perhaps they saw them as food. Either way, they definitely were not scared of T-Rexes, and so they definitely wouldn't be scared of us.